From the League of Minnesota Cities, this is City Speak. I'm your host, Adriana Tamale-Smith, and I'm super excited to be joined today by our Deputy Director, Luke Fisher. Luke, do you want to say hi and tell everybody what you're doing here?
Yeah, hey Adriana. I'm so excited to be here and co-host season 4 of the City Speak with you.
I am absolutely delighted that you're going to be co-hosting the season. We are going to be going out and having 10 amazing conversations with city leaders from around the state. And we're going to be diving into the things that make us leaders, those little places where we learn on the job. Sometimes we stumble, sometimes we succeed, and we always end up with a great story that has ended in us learning a lesson and being a better leader. So Luke, do you want to tell us how we're setting up the season?
Absolutely. Today, we're going to give you a little teaser of the upcoming season, which will be released at the end of August, as you said, Adriana. And ahead of that, we wanted to start out with the league's executive director and my boss, Dave Unmacht. So I hope you enjoy the conversation that Dave and I had, and I can't wait for you to tune in to the rest of season 4. To start the season, I'm joined by the league's executive director, Dave Unmacht, with over 35 years of experience in the public sector. Thanks so much for being here, Dave.
Greetings, Luke. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for being here. Dave, I've been thinking a lot about transitions and leadership challenges that people have that they've experienced through the pandemic, that they've experienced through transition with the election, and that they're experiencing as they're finding their footing in their jobs. And I'm wondering where you've experienced transitions in your professional career.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I got a great story from my past. It's a memorable one. I have a sense that very few people are going to have experienced something that I did. I call it my first real leadership test. It feels like it was yesterday, although it was about 33 years ago, and I was slightly under 30 years of age, but I still remember it to this day, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you.
That's great.
So here's the setup. First, let me explain it. So I was 24 when I started in Belle Plaine as the city administrator. I was there for about 2.5 years. And although the city administrator, it was a really informal community. There was probably 12 people that worked for the city, and we all reported to the city council, even though I was the point person. So it was like a family, and like any family, it worked sometimes and it didn't work sometimes, but the structure wasn't there, and the organization of management wasn't quite the same as it was and how I experienced in my career. And after leaving Belle Plaine, I went to be the assistant city manager in Prior Lake. And I did that. Mike McGuire was the city manager. Great move for me. I did economic development work and got started in really a formal organized structure. Worked out really well, great team, good city council, a lot of projects going on. And part of my job was to fit in. They had a crew there, the directors and department heads that had worked together for a number of years, and they got along really well. The culture was very strong. So my job was to fit in as the assistant. I was the new person on the staff. And I worked hard at that. And then all of a sudden, Mike took a job. He went to the city of Maplewood as the city manager, and the council and the staff promoted me. Essentially, the council did. I was the only candidate. I was interviewed. Even have a photo yet, Luke, of the interview of me with the city council in the city council chambers. It's kind of a memorable photo. And I was supported by the staff, and it was really cool. Well, that's the setup. Now here's where the story really begins.
Yeah.
My first real leadership test, and I didn't even know it. One day, probably, I can't remember exactly, but I was probably 6 to 9 months into my job as a city manager. Police chief walks into my office. Not unusual. It happened all the time. Dick Powell was his name. And he said, "Dave, let's go for a ride." And I enjoyed going for a ride with the police department and the chief. It was not unusual to do that. And I said, "Sure." I looked at my calendar, had probably nothing going on. I said, I'm all in. So off we go, and we were driving around. Next thing you know, he's heading towards the city of Shakopee. And I guess I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, or if I was asking him questions or what he had told me, but because the shock value of this was pretty significant. And we pulled up to a hotel right next to where the horse track is. And we walked in, and I had been in that hotel a number of times for meetings and whatnot. So it wasn't particularly odd, although I didn't quite know what the destination was. And sure enough, we walk into the hotel room, and there's a conference room right off to the side of the lobby there that I had been in a number of times. And we walked in, and I'm sure my anxiety was high, or my questions were pretty significant by that time. But as we walked in the door, there was the department heads sitting there, all there.
That's never a good sign.
No, it was not a good sign. And I said to myself, I go, uh-oh, something isn't right here.
Right.
And so, the chief obviously volunteered, or he said, I'll do this. And my recollection is that not everybody thought it was a great idea to drive to Shakopee, to somewhat surprise, if not totally surprise, the new city manager to come to this meeting. Right. But they all needed to be there to make it effective. And it certainly was my true aha moment in life and in leadership. And essentially, they did one-on-one. They went around the room and shared their concerns with what I was doing, how I was starting. But they also shared their support for me. They respected me as an individual. They liked me, and they wanted me to be successful. But I wasn't cutting it. I didn't make the transition very well at all from being a deputy to a city manager. I tried to do exactly what I did as a deputy, and that didn't work.
Sure.
I didn't look at everybody on an individual basis like I needed to as a city manager. As a deputy, you're a peer. As a city manager, you're not a peer anymore. You are you're the boss in quotations, obviously. And there were some other little things I was doing, and they were concerned about that. And they had the gumption and the ability to do it. But the way they did it was unique, a little scary, but it turned out to be a good move, and I respected them all for it afterwards.
So how long did it take you to feel good about that conversation that happened after it happened? Like, I can imagine being shell-shocked. I can imagine going home and telling my wife, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what just happened to me. Or did you walk out of that meeting whenever it was done and go, man, I feel really good and I feel really supported right now?
Well, I don't know if I said I felt really good. The surprise was still there, but the way it turned out was positive because the intention was good. Just the means by which it was created was difficult and different. It's not something I would have thought of. It's not something I would have expected. And their intention was to just say, hey, we want you to be in this position, but it isn't starting out very well. And each person went around the room and shared some observations, and some in more depth than others, as you can imagine, some a little more blunt than others, but they were all there. And I think that was important. And shortly thereafter, it was pretty much forgotten. I made some changes in what I did. I stopped hanging around with them. I used to do that. I quit doing that. Now, I wasn't completely antisocial, but I wasn't trying to be their friend anymore. I didn't participate in some of the activities that they did. And I think that made a difference. And part of what I realized, Luke, was that the previous city manager, Mike, who remains a friend of mine, essentially grew up with them in that job. They all started together, and they began their careers together. And so they had about 10 years, or not more, as working in this community that grew significantly. And I wasn't that. I didn't fit that bill. I wasn't trying to be Mike, but I was trying to continue everything the same as it was while Mike was there. And that was the fundamental error. They wanted to see Dave Unmacht's leadership. They wanted to see what I brought. They were interested in doing some things differently, naturally, right? Not unusual. And I wasn't doing that. And I didn't know it because I didn't know. I had never been a city manager. I'd never been in a position of responsibility like that. And in retrospect, I really appreciated their willingness to call a spade. And it needed to be done. And just the way it was done was a complete and total surprise.
So how has that changed how you confront people with a leadership challenge, or where you've seen people missing the mark? I think one of the things that I heard you say was that they sort of confronted you with support and with some critique. And I'm wondering how important that support element was in the message that you were receiving.
Well, clearly they wouldn't have done it if it was all support, right? The critique was really what led them to host a meeting of that nature. Sure. And they found the right balance for me. I was fragile. I mean, I was I didn't know what I didn't know. And they did a nice job of telling me, this is what we see. And, I was young enough where I hadn't established a true leadership style or a management style yet. Belle Plaine was a great place to start, but it didn't really test me in those capacities. It was a significant learning curve about everything being a city administrator. Prior Lake was the first test of my true leadership and management capabilities. And maybe more so than anything was the fact that everybody that reports to you and everybody in the city is different and unique. And you have to understand and learn and respect those differences in how you communicate with them, how you manage them, how you lead them. It kind of led to the story that I've shared oftentimes, especially in my master's degree classes, of kind of the four hierarchy. You have those eagles that like to soar, and they want to support you. They really like what they're doing. You let them go. And then you have those that are trying, but they don't have the skill, or they're not trying, but you know you can do it. You coach and develop them differently. And the final group is those that don't try and don't have the skills. And you have to spend a lot more time focusing on that group. So I kind of can put people in different one of those four categories, and how you deal and manage them is very fundamentally different. If you're someone who is trying but doesn't know how to do it, you're an eagle. You not only do you know how to do it, but you're doing it, and that's what I learned from that.
That's outstanding. So I can say, working for Dave, that one of his greatest strengths is his specialization and the way he works with each person. And Dave, I think that this lesson that you learned in Prior Lake has certainly helped define the whole arc of your career. And while I'm sure it probably felt like a seminal moment at the time, did you think that it was going to be something that really is the hallmark of your leadership style, that there's so much intention and individualization in your relationships with people you work with now?
Well, living through it, I just wanted to survive. It was like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? Thankfully, I liked each one of the people in the meeting. Turned out well. It was more of a shock than anything else. It really wasn't, Luke, until sometime afterwards, where it all kind of came together. Where because I had to produce. I mean, This was they played their card, right? They played a pretty significant card to have a surprise meeting offsite in a hotel. And then it was my turn to play my card. And it took some time, but I did. And it was a great experience. Loved working for the city of Prior Lake. There was a lot happening in that community. And if it wasn't for a unique opportunity in county government in Dakota County, I'd probably still be a city manager someplace doing a great job. It's a wonderful career. So more so after the fact, when the realization of how you can apply things you'll learn to what you do today and in the future came together.
Well, I've been joined today by Dave Unmacht. He's the league's executive director. Dave, you shared an outstanding story with us today, one that takes a lot of personal reflection that you had to be a little vulnerable to share, but I think an important leadership lesson with us. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for the quick story. And we look forward to getting back to more stories like this over a cup of coffee or a beer in the back of the conference room at a league event sometime soon.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you very much for the opportunity.